water machines, and urban systems. While stones locked in place, water did the real work, quiet, tireless downhill. Pull the camera up over Cambodia, where Angkor's grid lies in the dust like a paused circuit board. LiDAR stripped the jungle and showed barrays, vast reservoirs, strung to canals that could shunt a monsoon outburst or nurse a dry spell. Stakes: starve or drown, your capital lives by toggling between the two. Action: walk the embankments. Spillways drop in steps, each notch calibrated to a threshold. In flood, excess bleeds laterally through overflow fields that double as rice paddies. In drought, feeder channels dribble water to priority plots while the big reservoirs hold level by surface area, minimizing evaporative loss. Impact: Angkor isn't just temples. It's a hydraulic computer that flipped states when the sky changed, buying time for people to move, harvests to finish, and roads to hold. 3 ridgelines away, the Maya taught water to whisper. From the air you see a lacework. Canals no wider than a person is tall, berms barely rising above the swamp, and saddles cut through limestone that force flow into S-shaped meanders. Stakes: tropical downpour or 2-month dry, with cities perched atop thin soils. Action: follow a night gate. The caretaker lifts a pivoted plank at dusk before a storm, and a low canal slowly fills a set of storage basins. By morning, the berms seep just enough to keep root mats wet. No metal valves, no pumps, just heights that compel behavior. Impact: automation wasn't invented with code. Here it's gravity-driven logic gates: open, close, buffer, bleed. Unknown to them, across the Mediterranean, Rome warmed its winters with a domestic engine. A hypocaust is a floor held up on little brick mushroom stems. Hot air from a fire snakes under it and rises through flue tiles set in the walls. Stakes: a bathhouse that can't hold temperature is a riot waiting to happen. A villa with damp walls rots. Action: light the fire and watch a plume of heat lick along a channel. Vents pull air the way you'd tune a flute. A slave throws a lever, really, a tile, and the draft shifts to the caldarium or the tepidarium. Impact: climate control without wires, space carved to conduct heat the way a canal conducts water. Meanwhile, in Iran and North Africa, people carved water out of dryness with qanats and fagaras, sloped tunnels that catch the aquifer on the high ground and let it flow to fields by gravity alone. Stakes: sun, salt, and loss. Action: drop into a ventilator shaft where the air hits your face cool. The tunnel's tiny gradient, 1 hand's width per 100, keeps water moving without scouring. A checkerboard of access holes lets crews clean and repair, and because most of the run is underground, evaporation is strangled. Impact: a desert becomes programmable. Plant here, not there. Water now, not later. A ledger writ in slope. Unknown to them, under the sea, a Bronze Age ship went down with an instruction manual for trade. The Uluburan cargo reads like a bill of materials for a civilization. Copper ingots by the ton, tin enough to alloy, resins, glass, ivory. Stakes: no single city can be advanced alone. Metals and ideas ride the same hull. Action: lay the cargo on a warehouse floor by source and end use. You can see the supply chain as a machine. Smelters pump raw material, workshops modulate it into tools and status, palaces meter it out as gifts and obligations. Impact: the machine isn't a device, it's the rhythm of exchange, the timing of seasons and sea lanes, the way a drought in one valley echoes in someone's spear balance hundreds of miles away. While that was happening in Illinois, Cahokia's planners laid out mound and plaza like lungs and heart. Stakes: feed tens of thousands on floodplain soil that will drown you if you guess wrong. Action: walk the borrow pits that became ponds. In flood, they collect and settle silt. In dry months, they hold fish. The Grand Plaza sheds water in controlled sheets into ditches that carry it to fields. Mounds aren't just monuments. Some are weirs in disguise, redirecting surface flow and marking where to stage grain. Impact: logistics is landscape. Ceremony and storage share the same plan. Now watch a morning on a causeway at Angkor. A water tender squats beside a gate, ear to the splash. The monsoon is late, but upstream farmers sent word, lift 1 notch at dusk. He does, then checks a shrine's shadow. Stakes: a notch too far and you rob downstream, too little and you sour a basin. Action: he wraps the rope twice, holds, and the sheet of water thins to a silver knife. Impact: the operator interface is rope and skin and habit. The algorithm lives in his hands. Follow a Maya engineer priest at dawn. A slit in a wall catches the sun a finger-width off-center at solstice. Stakes: the calendar drives planting, tax, and ritual. Action: he smokes the slit with resin, sees the beam, chips 1 flake off an edge, 1/2 millimeter, and the light falls where the community expects. Impact: precision in stone is governance. The sky's predictability anchors obligation. Step into a Roman boiler room. The stokers talk in coughs and gestures. One learned to hear the change in draft as a bath shifts from warm to hot. Stakes. A misfire scalds a crowd. Action. He palms the vent tile too hot and uses a wet cloth to tweak flow. Impact. Feedback loops live in people. Systems run because bodies learn them. Drop down a canot shaft at noon. A boy's rope creaks as he lowers a basket of lime to his father below. Stakes. If the tunnel silts, the village goes dry. Action. They smear a thin slurry on a seam that started weeping muddy. It seals in minutes. Impact. Maintenance isn't a modern invention. It's built into the cut. And finally, back in the warehouse where the ship's cargo now sits in rows, a scribe tallies in a language we can't hear but can feel. Stakes. A missed ledger line becomes a missed harvest somewhere else. Action. He dips a reed, marks copper to tin ratios, sets aside a jar of resin for a palace, a jar for a temple, a jar for trade. Impact, water, fire, earth, managed through counting. The urban system is a drumbeat of inputs and outputs tuned across years. Cities ran on code long before code had keys. Water was the clock, gravity the motor, people the sensors and actuators. Once you see the gates and channels as logic, the leap back to gears doesn't feel so far. The next dial we turn isn't a calendar, it's a question. How did all this knowledge slip and who kept the embers? 5 human moments. The engineer priest is up before the parrots. He stands barefoot on cool stone and waits for the first blade of light. The slit he cut last season is a hair proud. Yesterday's clouds fooled him. Stakes. If the beam lands wrong, the planting drumbeat slips and so do taxes, feasts, obligations. He holds his breath. The sun edges, the beam walks and misses his chalk by a fingernail. Action. He warms the chisel in his palm, shaves a grain from the slit, and the light falls true, dead on the mark that says begin. Impact. Across the city, doors open, seed stores unstopper, a calendar turns into behavior. Unknown to him, a water tender further down the grid counts in heartbeats. The monsoon has piled a dark lid over the horizon. He can hear it in the frogs and the insects shutting up. Stakes. Lift too soon and he floods a neighbor's field, wait too long and he overtops the berm. He wraps the gate rope twice, braces his heel and nudges. Action. A scarf of water thins over the lip. The sound changes from gulp to whisper and he reads it like a friend's mood. 1 notch, not 2. Impact. Upstream basins fill without panic. Downstream channels take their drink. By morning, the city looks like it slept. In the Andes, a mason pauses with his head against stone, listening for what the wall wants. Stakes. The ground moved last night. The wall needs to move without breaking. He lifts his hammerstone and pecks a rounding the size of a thumbnail. Action. He sets the block, smokes the seam with soot and pulls it back. Where the soot kisses, he pecks again. Hours later, the block sighs into place. 10 faces meeting 10 faces on soft curves you can't feel until you try to take one away. Impact. When the next tremor comes, this tooth slides a hair and then stops, the way it was taught. Meanwhile, near a rain-slick road on Rome's northern edge, a scribe taps his reed dry and flexes cramped fingers. Stakes. A cohort without socks bleeds feet and morale. Beer isn't indulgence, it's clean calories. He reads the last line again for delivery before the frost, and adds a tiny hook to a letter that will mean urgent to a man 2 forts away. Action. He sands the tablet, strings it to another bundle, and passes it to a runner who's already wrapping his cloak. Impact. 2 weeks later, a soldier opens a crate and laughs. The frontier feels less like the end of the world. And back under gray water, a diver's gloved hand meets a patch of grit that isn't sand. Stakes. Down here, seconds cost breath. Grab wrong and you rot metal you didn't mean to touch. He brushes, sees a curve, then gear, then inscription, and every training drill drops away. Action. He calls the find with a voice that's too loud in his own ears. The team pivots, camera lights flare, and for a moment the sea goes from hostile to hushed. Impact. Months later, a lab tech will read a letter line he uncovered by accident and change a footnote into a headline. 5 human calibrations. A fingerwidth of light, a rope notch, a soot print, a hooked letter, a breath held on the seabed. Technique at city scale runs through pulses like these, repeatable decisions made by people whose names we'll never know in the service of machines that don't look like machines. Now hold that in one hand and in the other the part where we forget, because this is where the thread frays and the fights begin. Knowledge lost, found, and fought over. To see how quickly a chapter can slide, walk into a dating lab in the late afternoon. A technician lifts a sample from a kiln, logs a luminescence readout, and frowns. Stakes. A temple floor you thought was 2,000 years old just blinked older by 3 millennia with a margin small enough to make curators sweat. Action. They rerun it. Same result. They cross-check charcoal from a hearth in the same layer. The numbers agree. Impact, a site moves from after agriculture to before plows, and a tidy narrative, first farms, then gods, has to share space with a messier one where people organize around ritual long before wheat behaves. Meanwhile, in a storage yard under tarps, a mortar core that's bored dozens of graduate students gives up a bright answer. Quicklime nodules weren't mistakes. They were release repair kits. Stakes. If you accept that primitive materials science sometimes chose resilience over uniformity on purpose. Action. Teams replicate hot mixed mortars, crack them, and watch them knit in seawater. The paper gets into a journal where engineers read it, not just archaeologists. Impact. A city council in the present signs off on a pilot project to cut maintenance by learning from a harbor built for emperors. 3 days earlier, something quieter happened in a review meeting. A junior researcher had residue results that killed a fun story. A ritual object had plant oils and copper salts in patterns consistent with use as a tool. Stakes. For her, publication is a career's first rung. For her advisor, it's a chance to be the adult who says, change the label. Action. They write carefully, acknowledge uncertainty, and send the draft to a museum that's been selling the mystery for a decade. Impact. The label changes. A video script doesn't. The internet keeps the ritual, the catalog keeps the tool. Unknown to them across town, a grant officer opens 2 proposals. One documents a modest waterwork in a community with elders who have asked for slow disclosure. The other promises drones, a lost city, and a streaming deal. Stakes. Archaeology lives on money. Money loves spectacle. Action. One gets funded. One gets a note to reapply next cycle. Impact. A year later, a looting crew shows up 3 days after a teaser drops on a platform. The cautious site remains safe but understaffed. Ethics isn't a chapter in a syllabus. It's how fast you press publish. Redating has its own enemies. Tenure committees like stability, editors like citations that point downhill, not upriver. Stakes. If you got famous on a date, you don't rush to move it. Action. When a team proposes that a megalith sequence is centuries off, the reviews come back sharp. Extraordinary claims, insufficient sample size, context not secure. All fair, all sometimes code for don't make me redo my lecture. Impact. Paradigm shifts happen, but on the back of people who accept being disliked at conferences for a while. There's also privacy, not as a shield for secrecy, but as a choice. A community whose great-grandparents are buried beneath a mound asks a drone team to keep the LiDAR data off public servers until the elders bless a plan. Stakes. Knowledge isn't neutral, it lands on lives. Action. The team says yes. They turn down a feature. They come back in winter with heaters and tea. Impact. 2 seasons later, the community narrates their own release, with context no outsider could have written, and the comments section fills with something rare: respect. Looting fights back with speed. Scanning exposes and protects. It also paints targets. Stakes. Every attractive void is a question and a risk. Action. Some projects shift from excavation to watchpost. Locals get paid to be stewards. Lineage holders decide what can be shown. Impact. Sometimes the win is a silence. No pits, no fractures, knowledge kept alive in place rather than scraped to a lab. DNA and climate data have rewired collapse stories. Stakes. They vanished is seductive. They moved is harder to film. Action. Cores from lakes align drought decades with abandoned plazas. Genomes trace lineages across valleys and centuries. Impact. Collapse becomes transition. Disappearance becomes diaspora. The people in the present point to fields and say, we never left. Continuity hides in plain sight. A simple irrigation ditch turns out to follow the exact fall dictated by a canyon's breath. A planting festival lands on a solstice the way a beam has always wanted to land. Stakes. If you stack those continuities, the myth of clean breaks starts to wobble. Action. A historian walks with a farmer and realizes the new technique in a paper is just a great-grandparent's habit with Latin over it. Impact. Rediscovery feels less like conquest and more like listening. So lie, mistake, or selective memory? The easy answer would be to pick one villain and be done. The harder answer is that knowledge is brittle where institutions are brittle, that fashion, funding, and fear shape footnotes. That pride disguises itself as rigor as easily as speculation does. Meanwhile, the machines, stone, water, gear, ink, don't care about our arguments. They keep working or they don't. Here's how we're going to test that cleanly. We'll set criteria: function demonstrated, reproduction attempts, tolerances, and context fit. Then we'll run our scorecard and accept where it lands. But before the tally, sit with one more image: a solstice beam fixed by a 0.5 millimeter chip, A gate rope moved one notch, a soot mark guiding a stone, a hook on a letter, a gloved hand brushing silt from a gear tooth. Loss happens when those motions stop, when the apprentices leave, when the ledger burns, when the harbor goes quiet. Found happens when someone restarts them. Fought over happens in the space between, where a story is valuable and a truth is inconvenient. We're not chasing aliens. We're chasing accountability, to evidence, to people who live with it, to the future that could use a harbor wall that heals itself and a water grid that runs without a wire. The next section is the audit. The teeth interlock or they don't. Either way, the count is honest. 6 evidence reversals. 3 months into residue testing, a lab tech who hated the ritual label stared at a chromatography spike and laughed out loud. The clay vessel everyone filmed with incense smoke. Its pores held fatty acids and copper salts in patterns you get from repetitive dipping, tool use, not temple theatrics. Stakes. A decade of documentaries needed a revision. Action. Resample the neck, scrape the interior, run blind tests with controlled jars used for oils and bronzework. Impact. The label shifted from mystery right to workbench cup. The object didn't lose meaning, it gained fingerprints. While that was happening in the archives, a fort long listed as a hilltop redoubt coughed up angles the military never loved. Survey lines ran cardinal, not tactical. Post holes framed open skies. A slab with etched lines matched solar risings, a trench aligned to solstices. Stakes, fort or calendar lab. Action. Lay the plan on a sun chart, watch noon lines flirt with an equinox. Impact. The battlements demoted to berms, the site refiled as an observatory and training ground for time. Cross town, a palace basement every tour guide called wine storage had always smelled wrong, lime and damp, not grapes. A small team mapped conduits in the floor and found a stepped chamber with soot on vented ceilings. Stakes, wealth display or waterworks. Action, flood the model, gates carved like lotus petals throttled flow through hidden throats. Impact. The cellar snapped into focus as a controller, hydraulics behind courtyards, an infrastructural brain under a throne. 3 days earlier, a helicopter scan tossed up rectangles under forest that matched no agricultural ghost. LiDAR stitched as a green wireframe and formed gridded streets, canals, and compound walls where myth insisted a city once stood. Stakes, legend or layout. Action, ground truth a square, a terrace edge and a culvert answered. Impact. A lost city's bones appeared in amphibian chorus and leaf litter, aligning oral histories with contour lines. In a glass case, a statue dismissed as a later copy carried tiny tool signatures nobody had checked. Lead isotope and trace alloy fingerprints traced to ore older than the supposed original. Stakes, who imitates whom? Action, sample non-invasive, run the ratios, compare casting flaws. Impact, the copy turned out to be a teacher, the sequence flipped, influence flowed uphill in time. Finally, a local-style dagger glinted with a color a metallurgist didn't trust. Microprobe readings found foreign alloy additives, arsenic and nickel in patterns tied to a distant smelting tradition. Stakes, isolated genius or network shop floor. Action, map trade routes against element signatures. Impact, the blade became a passport stamp. Styles were local, recipes traveled. 6 reversals, 1 rhythm. When evidence deepens, categories break. A rite becomes a routine. A fort calibrates winter, a palace breathes water, a myth squares with a grid, a copy predates its master, a local hand holds foreign fire, and the question we started dodging is now up close. If these machines and methods were real, which of them still work and which of them merely sparkle under bad light? The 50 impossible machines, the audit. We promised a count, not a sermon. So we set the criteria where the teeth can catch, function demonstrated in the present, reproduction attempts that run without heroic hand-waving, tolerances you can measure with tools, not adjectives, and context fit. Does the device make sense in the world that built it? Group A, proven machines. The Antikythera Mechanism sits at the front like a metronome. Multiple reconstructions run. CT and inscription work nail gear counts, dials, and intent. Eclipse prediction, calendars, festival scheduling. It compiles. Roman hypocausts heat baths and villas when you rebuild them with brick piles and draft control. You can tune the temperature by hand like a musician. Qanats and Fagaras pull cold water through hills by gravity across centuries. Maintenance practices are continuous today. Roman concrete, hot mixed lime clast in Pozzolana, self-heals cracks in seawater. Lab cores grow calcite veins, modern engineers are piloting it. Inca Terrace hydrology regulates moisture and temperature. Layered soils, drains, and spillways work in reconstruction plots. These aren't anecdotes, they're appliances. Chalk 5 clear hits and a long tail of related tools. Shadoof's Noria wheels, the Uluburun supply chain engine that, while not a device, demonstrates a machine-like network. Group B, strong evidence, missing steps. Damascus steel holds its place with humility. Microstructures, carbide bands, controlled impurities, support the reports of blades that took brutal edges and kept them. Modern smiths can approach patterns and performance but admit the process memory, or sources, charcoal, air, got thin. Megalith logistics belong here. Baalbek's quarry lanes, sleds on wetted clay, reed mat ramps, cribbing, earthen causeways. You can move big mass with organization. Demonstrations move dozens of tons, not hundreds, but the physics scales. Puma Punku's modularity and abrasive tooling evidence also sit here. The right angles and striations point to grinding, sawing, and post-fit finishing. But a complete end-to-end replication at original scale without steel is a step we still owe. Score. Promising, teachable, reproducible in parts, awaiting full-scale, context-true runs. Group C, plausible but debated. The Baghdad jar, copper cylinder, iron rod, bitumen cap. In the lab with vinegar or grape juice, it will make a small potential, string a series, plate a trinket, tickle a wrist. But the archaeological context for standardized electrical applications is thin, residue chemistries and actual finds vary. A battery is possible, a program of electroplating or medicine isn't established. Also here, certain claims of laser-flat megalith surfaces. Under raking light and measurement, many are very flat, with grooves consistent with abrasive dressing, not lasers. Precision? Yes. Unattainable? No. The claims for ancient lathe-turned stone in every instance. Some show symmetrical tooling consistent with rotary abrasion, many others are the product of patient pecking and polishing. Debate sits on specifics. The general posture, skilled, systematized labor, holds. Group D misreads corrected by new data. Tool-mark myths that smuggled iron chisels into Bronze Age contexts fell apart when sequence and hardness tests reordered the layers. A polished slab billed as machined is a bearing plane for sliding blocks during placement. A fortress switches to calendar lab under sky alignment. A palace basement becomes a flow regulator. Copy versus original flips under alloy fingerprints. The point isn't to gloat, it's to prune. Or survives honesty. Now the scorecard straight. Of the 50 impossible machines on our table, Group A claims the largest confident slice. 21 devices and systems we can stand up and run with evidence humming. Antikythera, hypocausts, knots, Roman concrete, terrace hydrology, water clocks, balance scales with astonishing sensitivity, block and tackle rigs with documented sheave wear. The modularity of certain stone systems proven by reference surfaces and seating planes, canal logic that toggles by height, and the logistics soft machines of tally and supply. Group B holds 14. Damascus processes, full megalith logistics at scale, rotary abrasion rigs inferred from striations, large stone transport over mixed media, modular stone assemblies at Puma Punku replicable in segments, and long-span timber cranes modeled credibly, but awaiting full reconstructions with era-accurate constraints. Group C keeps 9. Baghdad jar use cases, universal lathe claims, extreme tolerance boasts at every site, speculative lenses from ambiguous glass, and select, magnetic compasses inferred from textual hints. Group D carries 6 we retire from the impossible list. Chisel myths, laser fantasies on bearing surfaces, ritual mislabels that turn out to be workshop kit. Copy versus original assumptions inverted, basement waterworks me sold as sellers, and the alien screamers we simply don't feed. What does that mean in plain numbers? 35 of 50 lean toward workable, with 21 robust enough to hand to a city council or a physics class. 9 invite plausible debate with incomplete archaeological support. 6 deserve a respectful benching. We learned, we move on.